And good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols, and I will be your host this morning. Thank you so much for joining us this morning for Mighty Men Thursday with our special guest who will be on a little bit later at the top of the 8 o'clock hour, Judge Joe Brown. So thanks so much to everybody who's joining on YouTube, Facebook, and X. And Jay Smooth is joining us this morning. Thank you so much for joining us. He says, "Good morning, beautiful Black Americans." Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And thank you for that. Good morning. And good morning to you. So I wanted to start out with a scripture. I know I read this yesterday, but I wanted to read it again and also add in a few more verses to this chapter. And this is 2 Timothy chapter 3. And it talks about perilous times and perilous men. And this is the New King James Version. It says, "But know this, that in the last days, times will come, for men will be lovers of themselves, lovers of money, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, ungodly, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers, without self-control, brutal, despisers of good, traitors, headstrong, haughty, lovers of pleasure rather than lovers of God, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And from such people turn away. For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women, loaded down with sins, led away by various lusts, always learning and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth. Now, as Jambres recited Moses, so do these also resist the truth. Men of corrupt minds, disapproved concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, and theirs also was, as theirs also was. Yeah, so I wanted to read just that full passage. I know the other day I only read till verse 5, but when I read it again, I said, let me read it again till verse 9 to really look at, we are, we're in the last days. It is what it is. But we need to make sure that we are equipped to know and understand what we should and shouldn't be doing. And some of the parts that stood out to me were definitely, it says, of this, where it talks about, people having a form of godliness, denying its power, and from such people turn away. For of this sort are those who creep into households and make captives of gullible women. And, just as of late, you do see a lot of women on the internet, and some of them, you can tell that they're not, how should I say, you can tell they've been led astray. I should say that. You can tell. And they use different types of emotion. I mean, I've seen women literally, how should I say, supporting criminal behavior and justifying it, right? We're going to justify this criminal behavior. I'm like, wow. And when I see that, I think about this passage. I think about this right here, because it makes it real. It's like, okay, I know a lot of times people are like, oh, the Bible's not real. Look, called it out very succinctly. Okay. And then talking about, men of corrupt minds. Wow. Disapproved concerning the faith, but they will progress no further, for their folly will be manifest to all, as theirs also was. So this is all going to come out. So it's not like these people are going to be able to hide, and they're not hiding. I think that's the scariest part to me, that people are so emboldened to be lovers of pleasure instead of lovers of good. And they're lauded for it. They're supported for being lawless. It's very scary. It's very, very, very intense, very scary. So I also wanted to bring up, I'm going to watch a couple of videos. The first one is going to deal with immigration, and then the second one is going to deal with Jasmine Crockett. And I'm not picking on her, but I just wanted to bring up her video because she does make some good points. But then some of the points she makes, I was like, okay, I want to actually look at some of the topics that she's brought up and go a little bit more in depth and just understand, why she's even bringing that up. So let's start out with our first video. Of course, this is from Cash Jordan, and definitely give him a follow if you're on YouTube, and a like for this video.
Rioters are attacking these places. What do you think about all this? What do you think about crazy rioters storming an immigration court? Isn't that ridiculous?
As agents reach the second building,
cue this to the beginning. Sorry about that.
Inside, a man, we're told, who had just appeared for a routine immigration hearing. They forced their way through the protesters and pushed the man they're detaining into a van. But the crowd moves with them, including several protesters who threw themselves on the hood of the moving van.
Animals!
As some agents climbed into vehicles, others walked from one courthouse to another, with protesters following step for step.
Wow.
As agents reach the second building, another confrontation.
It's a brawl.
An agent throwing a man to the ground, and then a gray sedan pulls
Watch
up.
this. Look at this guy.
The crowd dispersed after that federal officer stepped out carrying what appears to be an assault rifle.
He's ready, man.
A man who has been operating an information table for migrants outside the courthouse describes the chaos.
You could just see the ICE guys going wild with the batons and pushing through the crowd, grabbing people's bikes and using them to hit people and stuff.
Even before the larger confrontations began, a San Francisco man who was on his way to work says he was hit by an unmarked ICE SUV in a crosswalk.
Can I have his badge number and name?
Oh, these people are so ridiculous. Obviously, the protesters are out of control.
The ICE information table organizer says that inconvenience is nothing compared to what he believes these detainees are facing as they try to legally apply for citizenship or asylum.
They're doing everything they can to be here legally.
These rioters are crazy.
Before following the procedures, they're getting abducted.
No, they're getting deported because they're not supposed to be in America at all. Here's another angle of the front door. Look, it's just absolute mayhem. Look at this. Unbelievable.
Protesters were blocking the front door of the courthouse with their bodies and
bicycles. No one could get in or out.
Shortly after 11 this morning, when agents armed with rifles and pepper spray tried to enter the court to escort other agents already inside. At one point, a black SUV drove through the crowd, knocking a person to the ground. Quite something, because we haven't seen a lot of this in San Francisco. We've seen so much of it in Los Angeles, so you wonder if some of these actions will be spreading to other blue cities like San Francisco to try to make a point.
I think they probably will, and that point is that these places do not want law and order at all, and these protesters are totally out of control. Look at this view right here.
And various clashes outside the courthouse.
Blocking the car with their bodies.
As SFPD watched as onlookers, reportedly, one of those ICE agents says, "We'll get you next time, we'll be back." So that's how that one came to an end, as we're looking at the continued video here and just the chaos that happened outside this courthouse in San Francisco.
If this isn't an insurrection, I don't know what is, but their idea that this is going to spread elsewhere, well, as you're about to see, it's already happening.
The family from Honduras says they came to court to continue their asylum claim after legally being allowed to enter the country. Their pastor says a judge gave them until October to come back with an attorney and continue the case. But waiting ICE agents grabbed Sawyer's dad anyway.
That's a lot to bear, particularly if you have a little girl around that age.
Local elected officials say what they saw Tuesday in federal immigration court marks an escalation in the Trump administration's mass deportation effort. They say immigration officials are not only arresting those leaving court who've had their cases dismissed, meaning they have no right to stay in the country, but have begun grabbing anyone at court, even those with pending cases.
Okay, so as you're about to hear, local officials are encouraging elevated levels of resistance to go hand in hand with what they're calling an escalation. But the problem is, the whole reason people are being picked up at these courtrooms with a pending case is because their temporary protected status has been canceled and they've been ordered to leave the country. So they might have a pending case, but they're here illegally because the program that brought them into America was illegal to begin with.
Have essentially ceased to be courthouses. These buildings are essentially abduction traps.
That's not true.
Congressman Dan Goldman represents Lower Manhattan and met with Soya's family outside of court. He says this is now happening to dozens of families each day in New York City.
Because
Goldman says
they've been
immigration
ordered to
officials
leave.
have been emboldened by the passage of President Trump's, quote, big beautiful bill, which devotes tens of billions of additional dollars to hiring and giving bonuses to immigration agents and setting up more detention facilities.
That's not true at all. The people in these pictures getting deported, they've been ordered to leave America, and they haven't done so. And they want to come to court. They want to fight it out. Well, you know, this is what happens if a judge doesn't say, hey, you're allowed to stay.
Overall, encouraging more aggressive immigration enforcement.
A horrific bill that will take health care, food assistance, school loans away from everyday Americans.
You mean illegal immigrants?
In order to pay for not only tax cuts for the billionaires, but to increase the budget for ICE.
You couldn't make these politicians up if you tried. These guys are ridiculous.
And during a cabinet meeting today, President Trump continues to cast the mass deportation effort as targeting criminals and the worst of the worst, despite what we have seen even today with all.
Okay, if you're in the United States without permission, even if an illegal program brought you into the United States, you commit a crime by remaining here after you've been told to leave. But now the problem is ICE agents who are being made the enemy are getting ambushed even outside of the courtrooms.
The eyes always tell the story. These are the suspects arrested and charged with attempted federal law enforcement officer after they spent their 4th of July allegedly ambushing officers at the Prairieland ICE Detention Center in Alvarado, Texas.
This is horrible.
This was part of an organized attack. It was a planned ambush with the intent to ICE corrections officers. Make no mistake, this was not a so-called peaceful protest.
None of it is.
It was indeed an ambush.
Tonight, we're getting stunning new details about how they did it. They were clad in black tactical gear. The complaint says the group lured DHS corrections officers outside by shooting fireworks at the detention center building. So agents called 911, and then they went outside to investigate and talk to the suspects. A few minutes later, an Alvarado police officer arrived on the scene. The moment he stepped out of the car, a gunman who was hidden in the woods opened fire.
There is nothing peaceful about this, and the politicians are making it so much worse by telling people that courthouses are no longer places of justice. They're now kidnapping zones. That's ridiculous. The people entering the courthouse are already in violation of the law. That's why they're getting arrested. People enter immigration court every single day, and if they've got a real reason to be here, they don't get deported on their way in or their way out.
Those officers are all blessed to be alive tonight. A jammed AR-style rifle was found at the scene.
That's
now, imagine how many could have. So what motivated these suspects? Like Cameron Arnold of Dallas, Texas, a.k.a. Autumn Hill, or Savannah Batten.
These
of
are
Fort
the
Worth,
people.
Texas.
Wow.
She was previously arrested for obstructing a highway during another deportation protest back in 2018.
Oh, they've got prior experience.
Then there's Nathan Bauman. Look at his eyes. College Station, Texas. Per the complaint, he was carrying spray paint and flyers saying, "Fight ICE terror with class war," and
these people are totally drinking the Kool-Aid. And when an elected official gets on TV and says that an iron curtain of fascism is descending upon America, and it's all ICE and Donald Trump's fault, and we have to resist or history's going to repeat itself, that's what we're now seeing in America. It's very disturbing. Politicians should be held accountable.
Free all political prisoners. Then there's Zachary Evitz of Waxahachie, Texas. Per the complaint, Evitt's car was spotted fleeing the scene with other suspects in it. He was later found walking along the road about 3 miles from the ICE facility. Police searched him, and they found a black balaclava, a mask, a pair of tactical-style gloves, and a pair of safety goggles. An officer asked Evitz where he was coming from, and he said, "I do not know."
Great
answer.
answer.
To that effect. Then there's Joy Gibson.
People are professional
of Dallas,
protesters.
Texas. The complaint says that she had 2 cell phones in the backpack inside a Faraday
Who's giving
bag,
them all this
which is
money
used
to
to
buy all
prevent
this stuff?
law enforcement from tracking location information. Then there's Bradford Morris of Dallas, a.k.a. Megan Morris. Per the complaint, Morris's house was used as a staging location before the ambush.
Do we even need to know the political party these people are casting votes for when it's election time? Or can we guess what it is?
Police recovered 9 additional firearms, 3 body armor vests, cans of spray paint, and fireworks. Then Elizabeth Soto and Inez Soto, both of Fort Worth,
family
Texas.
affair.
There's Marcella Rueda, also from Fort Worth, and Seth Sykes of Cannondale, Texas.
These people are crazy.
They were found after fleeing the scene with a few other suspects that I mentioned earlier. Now, the complaint says they were all dressed in this black military-style clothing, like make-believe soldiers. Some had body armor, some covered in mud, some armed, some had a banner found by one of the officers that read, "Resist fascism." And this is the favorite, "Fight the oligarchy."
Where are they hearing these slogans? They're getting it from elected officials that think they can just go out there and rile up the populace. Can you imagine if Donald Trump said something and then someone were harmed in some way even weeks later? Do you know what the story would be then? But no, these progressives, they're out there on the news riling people up all across the country. That's how we've got these riots in LA. The protesters are being emboldened by their leaders. And these are no longer protests. These are riots. This is like an uprising in our country. And the most disturbing thing about all of this is there is zero accountability on behalf of the media, who's misleading people with stories about quote-unquote U.S. citizens being detained during ICE raids, sometimes failing to completely mention that these people are out there going after ICE agents, or the politicians that are acting like some horrible injustice is happening in America when law enforcement is out there doing its job, arresting criminals, arresting the worst of the worst. Recently, they just caught a house that was used to smuggle international state-sponsored assets into our country. This house was taken down about a week ago. These are the people that these rioters and protesters are defending when they shut down an immigration court or when they try to stop the wheels of justice. They're making our entire country less safe. At the same time, these sob stories about people getting deported when they go to immigration court after they've been told that remaining in America is a violation of immigration law, it's hard to imagine that these people expected anything other than deportation to happen once they decided not to leave our country after they were ordered to do so. And now rioters are attacking these places. What do you think about all this? What do you think about crazy rioters storming an immigration court? Isn't that ridiculous? I think it is, and I think something should be done about it. Let me know. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the work that Cash Jordan does. He pretty much has videos out, a few videos a day where he covers this. And I wanted to thank Chris for reposting the stream, and also for Unc. Thank you for reposting the stream as well, and for joining us here this morning. So, it's getting worse. It's not getting better. I'm glad that the bill that was recently passed by Congress, H.R. 1, has amped up the funding, right? But it has not, it hasn't been able to thwart the uprising and the civil unrest. Because now, a lot of these governors and councilmen have made it an us against them situation. And Unc says, "Good morning. My number one place for true information. No fake news here." Well, thank you. I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate you saying that, because I definitely want to arm each and every one of you, as well as myself, with good information, right? And not with soiled information. With that, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I got a couple more videos that I want us to watch just to kind of drive home the point of a lot of this misinformation that we do have going on out there. And I'm really hoping, really, I should say praying for our ICE agents that are out there doing the hard work right now. Definitely keep them in your prayers. And we'll be right back after this message.
The browsers of today are broken. They've been overtaken by a barrage of sneaky and annoying ads, trackers that follow your habits, and cookies that build profiles, and all sorts of other internet clutter that's taking precedence over the content that you want to see. In fact, these useless bites can take up to a whopping 50% of page load times, with a third of it anxiously trying to learn more about you. To make matters worse, some ad blockers are even letting ads through when large advertisers pay them. But do you really want a leaky ad blocker? It's because of these very reasons that we developed Brave, a new browser that kicks internet crud to the curb and makes it faster, safer, and better to surf the web than your current browser. With Brave, everything you need is built right in. We integrated technology that automatically blocks trackers, annoying ads, and shields everything that can cramp your style and destruct your privacy. With it, you can expect increased speeds nearly 2 times faster on laptops and up to 4 times faster on mobile. And unlike any other browser, Brave allows you to support your favorite publishers with automatic micropayments, so it's a win-win for you and your favorite sites. To top it all off, Brave is open source, because we truly believe it's our web and we need to fix it together. So ask yourself this question: do you want a web browser made for the internet of today? If so, try Brave. It's faster, safer, and ad-free.
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered, 7 to 9 a.m., Monday through Friday, Eastern Standard Time. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols. And so now we're going to get into this next video. And I just want to preface this. I'm not picking on this particular congressperson, but I do want you guys to just see this person's perspective. And then I want to point out a few things that they are discussing in this particular video.
Hey everyone, so I am joining you just for a quick second, and yes, this will truly be a quick second because my staff is about to come and get me. I know that you have not heard from me since the terrible bill actually made its way through the House and onto the president's desk. I know that you also haven't heard from me since the devastating floods. I don't want you to think that I've checked out. I have been talking about these issues. I am in New Orleans. I have been talking almost every single day. But I wanted to talk to y'all because I know that y'all are people that may listen to me just a little bit. And I want to tell you that, you know, first of all, we need to truly give our heartfelt prayers to those that are still missing, as well as to those that have lost, you know, young kids. I mean, losing life in general is awful, but we've got babies that have died, and as far as I'm concerned, it's inexcusable. It makes no sense for us to have the level of knowledge, the level of technology, the understanding of science that we have, and to pretend as if we have literally no tools, to be ignorant enough to fire people who are saving people's lives every day. So I want you to think about these moments. Don't look at this and think, oh, it's Texas, and so it's not my issue. I want y'all to understand that anything that happens at any place in this country could easily happen at your front door, from the immigration raids to the terrible weather that we know we experience, because climate change really is real. It is unfortunate that we are not investing more to make sure that we can better understand climate change and do the things that we need to do. There was a little thing called the Inflation Reduction Act that was really helping us to do our part to hopefully stop the planet from heating up a little bit. But we are really in a bad way right now, and it's for so many reasons. I want you to understand, and I'm going to do my best to kind of do things in snippets so we can really talk through this bill. But the one thing that I want you to understand, whether it's the bill, whether it's defunding NOAA, whether it's going after FEMA, whether it's going after the Department of Education, whether it's SNAP benefits, whether it's going after Medicaid, whether it's defunding Social Security, I want you to understand that no matter how much you may think this has nothing to do with you, it does. I want you to understand that these things are bigger than kind of what you've been hearing in the headlines when it's like, oh, 17 million people will lose their Medicaid. And then you sit around and you say, well, I don't have Medicaid, so that doesn't have anything to do with me. It absolutely does. It does. We're talking about the hospital that you need to show up to, even if you've got that great insurance, that may not have its doors open because of the funding that Medicaid has not dropped in to make sure that that organization could be sustained. Whether we're talking about people not getting the regular checkups that they need, and therefore emergency room times increasing, or whether we're talking about the cost of care that is already super expensive going up on each and every one of you. To delete $1 trillion out of our healthcare system is going to impact all of us. The same thing with defunding NOAA. This is something that's going to impact all of us. I don't live in a hurricane state. That is for sure, or at least in my area. Let me make it clear, because obviously Texas still does. But defunding NOAA and putting somebody over FEMA who doesn't understand that there's this thing called hurricane season, it's going to impact those that have to endure hurricanes. I truly don't know what to say to get people to wake up and understand that my position has nothing to do with Democrats or Republicans. My position has everything to do with people serving others. That is what we are supposed to do as public servants. That's it. I don't ask questions about, well, is it only Republicans that are going to lose their Medicaid? Because if so, then it's okay. That's not how I look at things. And frankly, going forward, I don't really care how you consider yourself affiliated. You should be voting for people that are always going to keep people at the center of their focus. And instead of allowing them to get away with giving you some soundbite, ask them the why. Ask them the how. If they say, oh, we're not going to do tax on tips, ask them for the minutia. Ask them for the details. Let's see if there's a real plan. So anyway, I just wanted to jump on because my heart is truly heavy for all of these families. The sad part is, I think that my heart is going to carry a level of weight that will continue to weigh me down as we have to continue to do our best to survive an administration that literally is against us. An administration that is doing everything, in my mind, to hurt us and not help us. And it feels like we're fending for ourselves. And no one should feel that way. So I just wanted to jump on because there's a lot of heaviness going around. There was not celebrations for me on the 4th of July because if anything, it felt like a lack of independence. As a member of the U.S. House, it feels like we are less independent than we ever have been. It seems like that branch has been co-opted by the executive branch. Same thing goes for the Supreme Court for me. So anyway, keep your heads up, keep praying, keep working, keep educating, and if you feel inclined, run for office. It is going to be up to us to save us, because these people are absolutely not working for the good of us. So take it easy. Everyone, have a safe work week as you get back to work after this holiday weekend. God bless.
Now, I don't know about you guys, but a lot of what she said, it was very confusing to me. Because I was like, okay, it's like I understand. It was a lot of doublespeak, because you're like, oh, I feel less free. I'm like, ma'am, we were invaded under the prior administration. We were literally invaded. Now, she did bring up some things that I wanted to look up for you guys. She mentioned NOAA and the National Weather Service, and we definitely send our prayers out to those who have lost their lives in Texas in that particular area, and praying for the families that, they do find their loved ones, and loved ones that have been found, that they were praying for their healing, right? If they've lost their homes, or, if they were injured in any way. But I wanted to bring this up because a lot of times when she talks about sound bites, and she talked in very broad terms. I'm glad that she encouraged people to run for office. That was a good one. She was like, yeah, definitely run for office. So she opened it up, y'all. Run for office. If you're in Texas, run for her seat. Hey, why not? Let's do this. But I wanted to find out, was anyone fired that could have helped with the floods? And it says yes. Several experienced personnel were let go from the National Weather Service and its parent organization, the National Ocean and Atmospheric Administration. That's what she was mentioning, NOAA, due to staffing cuts initiated by the Department of Efficiency, which is DOGE, under the Trump administration. These cuts significantly impacted the workforce, with over 500 staffers being laid off since the beginning of the year, including specialized climate scientists and experienced forecasters. Additionally, some NWS field offices were no longer staffed 24 hours a day, and hundreds of experienced forecasters and senior managers were encouraged to retire early. The reduction in personnel and resources raised concerns among former federal officials and experts, who warned that these cuts could impair the NWS's ability to issue timely and accurate forecasts, which are crucial for public safety during severe weather events like the Texas floods. Despite these concerns, some meteorologists defended the NWS, stating that the agency accurately predicted the risk of flooding in Texas and the extreme severity of the storm could not have been foreseen. Nonetheless, the loss of experienced personnel and the reduction of operational capacity were seen as potential contributing factors to the challenges faced in adequately preparing for and responding to the catastrophic flooding. So I was like, okay, all right, point made. So I was like, okay, so what is the current staffing? I just wanted to know, like, so what are we dealing with? This is, as of July 2025, the National Weather Service has experienced significant staffing shortages across the United States, with nearly half of its 122 forecast offices operating with vacancy rates of 20% or higher, twice the rate of a decade ago. 8 offices are reported to be missing some than 35% of their staff, which experts consider critically dangerous. These shortages have led to reduced operational capacities including some offices no longer launching weather balloons and a critical data source for forecast and limiting forecast updates to once daily instead of continuous monitoring. Okay, so to me, that's administrative, right? When you're not doing the weather balloons, when you're not doing the continuous updates, who is that really on, right? Is that on the lack of staff that you have, or have they made adjustments in how they're alerting the public? So the staffing crisis has been attributed to job cuts initiated during the Trump administration, particularly those driven by Doge, led by Elon Musk. Nearly 600 employees left NWS in a short period ending in June 2025, including both fired probationary employees and those taking early retirement packages. As of now, the NWS has 3,000 vacancies and has lost 1,875 employees under the Trump administration. So if they have 3,000 vacancies, that means that those are jobs that are open for people to be in. They're not eliminated. So we can get people in there. So it's not that they're gone, right? So in response to the crisis, President Trump's nominee to lead the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, Neil Jacobs, has pledged to prioritize restaffing the NWS if confirmed, though he also supports a proposed 27% budget cut for NOAA in fiscal 2026. The National Weather Service Employees Organization and former NWS directors have expressed concern over the impact of these staffing levels on public safety, especially during severe weather events. Several key leadership roles remain unfilled, including meteorologists in charge and warning coordination meteorologist positions, which are essential for coordinating with local emergency management and issuing timely warnings. These vacancies have already had real-world consequences, such as deploying tornado damage assessments in Kentucky and reduced forecasting accuracy during the Texas floods in July 2025. Now, prior to this, we've had severe storms everywhere. You know, Katrina. We had the situation in Asheville, right? In Tennessee. So North Carolina. So what are we talking about? Now you're acting like just because it's happened just now, it's like, oh, it's all Trump's fault. Stop that. You had more people before Trump got here and you still had the same results. I'm sorry. The weather systems happen. We are human beings. There are some things that are going to be out of our control. I don't care how many fancy gadgets and people we have in place. It's going to happen. Period. There is going to be devastation everywhere. It's going to happen. The problem is when people try to politicize it. That's an issue for me. It should be an issue for everybody else. Yeah, there were cuts. But again, they had more people during Katrina than they have now. What happened? I'll wait. I will wait. And because of Katrina, they put more positions in place, right, to mitigate damage. Have they been able to stop the damage? What happened in Asheville? No, I'll wait. Stop politicizing this. So I asked some other questions. Were there warnings prior to the flood? And the National Weather Service issued multiple warnings in advance of the July 2025 Central Texas floods. So irregardless to what Jasmine Crockett was saying, it's like, no, these people were still warned in advance. They had time. They had the warnings. If they didn't heed the warnings, what are they supposed to do? What are the meteorologists supposed to do? If they gave the warnings, they gave the warnings. If people didn't take the warnings, they didn't take the warnings. And they thought that they could write it out. They thought it wouldn't be as bad as it was. And Unc says, my question, is this a reliable source, right? A lot of Democrats work for these outlets. Let's see what the National Weather Service leadership has to say, right? Not these clowns. And I hear you. I hear you. I definitely hear you. Now, like I said, I literally just pulled this up off of ChatGPT because I was just asking questions of ChatGPT, like I'm asking more statistical information, not emotional information, right? Because I wanted to know, because based on what Jasmine Crockett was saying, she's acting like, okay, this is Trump's fault. Even ChatGPT tried to blame it on Doge, but I'm like, okay, after asking it the other question, I was like, were there alerts? And it was like, yeah, some alerts were sent. Now you're going to be surprised at another question that I asked, because I said, because it actually brought up, it says flash flood warnings were issued for Bandera County at 11 p.m. on July 3rd, followed by a considerable flash flood warning for Bandera and Kerr counties at 1 a.m. on July 4th, which triggered wireless emergency alerts and NOAA weather radio notifications. Further along the Guadalupe River, flash flood emergencies were issued for Kerrville at 5 a.m. and for Comfort at 7 a.m. Warning of catastrophic damage and deadly flood waves. So they were given, warnings. It said, despite these timely warnings, challenges remained sorry, you guys. That happens with my phone sometimes. Let's see. It says, despite these timely warnings, challenges remained in ensuring that all residents received and acted upon them, particularly during the early morning hours when many were asleep. Some areas like Kerr County lacked additional warning systems, such as outdoor weather sirens, which may have hindered the effectiveness of communication efforts. So I was like, well, why didn't they have this? So I said, does Kerr County have warning systems? Because I really had to pare down, because what's happening is people are I want to say at a high level, if we don't know what's happening in Kerr County, we can just assume and we can just dump it all on the weather service, right? You didn't give the warnings when you were supposed to. You didn't do your job. Well, let's see what were the warning systems that are in Kerr County. And it says of July 2025, Kerr County, Texas does not have outdoor warning sirens. That's not up to the federal government to make sure Kerr County has outdoor warning sirens. That's a local issue. That is not a national issue. That's local. And if they're known for having flash floods and these different things, why hasn't that been put in place at the local level? That's the bigger question. And it says that they don't have warning sirens or a comprehensive emergency alert system in place to notify residents during severe weather events like the catastrophic flood that occurred on July 4th. They don't have it in place. That comes back down to local. That is nothing national. There's nothing we can do about that. That's like me telling you, hey, there's burglars in the area. And you're like, yeah, there's burglars. And you're like, you know what? It might be good to get, like a good security system, you know what I'm saying, to keep your house safe. And you're like, yeah, I'll think about it. I'm not sure. I'm like, okay. And so you don't get it and you get robbed and your house is devastated. You're like, oh my gosh. It's like, bro, we told you. We warned you. Like, why didn't you have your security in place? That's like this. Yeah, I am making that example because lives could have been saved had they put the warning systems in place. But it comes back to, why didn't they? That's a question at the local level. It says the county relies primarily on NOAA, weather, radio, mobile alerts, and local media for emergency notifications. That's not the government's fault if that's how they decide to get their information. However, during the early morning hours of the flood, many residents were asleep and did not receive timely alerts, contributing to the loss of life. Officials acknowledge that the absence of loud outdoor sirens, which are common in many other counties prone to severe weather, limited the effectiveness of emergency communication during the flood. In the aftermath, local leaders and emergency management officials have indicated they are reevaluating their warning systems and public communication strategies to improve preparedness for future events. So again, this is a local issue. This is not a national issue, but they're taking it and they're using it to incite again a political position. And that's sick. Stop it. Don't do that. These people lost their lives because of the lack of fiduciary duty on their local government. And this lies at their feet, those individuals. And they need to face their constituents in their city and say, we need to do better. We failed you. The local level failed. It was not the national level. Not this time. They needed to do better, and they should at every indication. The other issue I wanted to look at that Jasmine Crockett brought up, she brought up the Inflation Reduction Act, and that's what I have here on the screen. And she was talking about, well, you know, we had put in place with the Inflation Reduction Act, you know, funding to basically, I guess, help out with climate change, right? So there's something that was called a Neighborhood Access Equity Grant. And what it did, it says, in addition to amounts otherwise available, there is appropriated for fiscal year 2022 out of the money in the Treasury, not otherwise appropriated, a lot of money. This is hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, so over $1 billion, close to $2 billion to remain available until September 30th, 2026. So that's until next September, to the administrator of the Federal Highway Administration for competitive grants to eligible entities described in subsection to improve walkability, safety, and affordable transportation access through projects that are context sensitive. So, you know, it's like to remove, remediate, or reuse a facility, to replace a facility described in subsection with a facility that is at grade or lower speed, to retrofit or cap a facility described in subsection, to build or improve complete streets, multi-use trails, regional greenways, or active transportation networks or spines, or to provide affordable access to essential destinations, public spaces, or transportation links hubs, to mitigate or remediate negative impacts on the human or natural environment resulting from a facility. So I'm not trying to like shoehorn the situation in Kirk County, but they might be able to tap into this as a city and say, you know, based on what happened, we need to utilize some of the funding that's available from the Inflation Reduction Act, right? But she tried to make it seem like, oh, there's no money there for these things. The money's there because they extended it through to at least 2026. It's just the disingenuousness of what she was saying. And that's why I played her video all the way through. It's like, yes, we do need to pray for the individuals in Texas. Don't politicize it, you know, and you're talking about this big, beautiful bill is so horrible. People are not going to lose their Social Security. The people that are going to lose Social Security are people that shouldn't have gotten it in the first place, which are people here illegally on TPS, which is temporary protected status, which are paroled in the United States. They shouldn't be receiving Social Security ever because they didn't pay into the system. It's like, how are you going to receive something that you didn't even pay into? Really? That's what we're doing? You know, And her being in the House of Representatives and, I guess, touting that it's sad. It's like, ma'am, this act, is it perfect? No. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'm not even going to go down that road. Are there areas in it that, I should say they can shore up? Yeah, they can. And they will, because they can amend, certain sections of this bill. But for the most part, what it did was it got people off of social services that shouldn't have been there in the first place. So that 17 million people you're talking about that it's going to affect are probably people that are here illegally, not legal people. The illegal people. Read the bill. But maybe you didn't even read it or want to read it because you didn't want it to pass anyway, because you don't care about the American people. You don't. And I want to talk to Democrats and Republicans. There are just times in life where you can't just pick sides because somebody's a Republican or a Democrat. You have to do what's right for the American people. The one thing I will agree with is she says, we are here to serve the people. Are you sure about that, Jasmine? Because whenever I hear you speak, you're not serving the people. You're serving the people that have paid you to be in that seat. That's a totally different situation. And we can tell by the way you vote. We can see by the way you move. And someone has told you, hey, you need to, correct course. So I see you've changed your hair. I see you've dialed it back on the eyelashes slightly, even though you still look like you're a performance artist. Dial it back a little bit more so you look like you're actually in the office and not going out to the club. Just saying. Less is more. Yeah, you are definitely trying to dial it back because people have told you the whole sister girl thing doesn't work. But what I'm telling you is the disingenuousness of what you said within your video doesn't work either. People do not want illegal immigration. They want legal immigration. Work on that since you're here to serve the people. The other great thing you said is for people to run for office. So for everybody out there, I'm encouraging you, get off the couch and do exactly what she said. Run for office. And with that, I'm going to play one more video before we go into our break. And I really want you to pay attention to what's being said in this video.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Everybody have a seat. Thank you. Thank you so much. Hello, Stanford. It is great to be in California and back in beautiful Palo Alto. Coming here always makes me want to go back to college. I'm convinced that right now, one of the biggest impediments to doing all of this, indeed, one of the biggest reasons for democracy's weakening, is the profound change that's taken place in how we communicate and consume information. For more and more of us, search and social media platforms aren't just our window into the internet, they serve as our primary source of news and information. No one tells us that the window is blurred, subject to unseen distortions and subtle manipulations. All we see is a constant feed of content where useful, factual information and happy diversions and cat videos flow alongside lies, conspiracy theories, junk science, quackery, white supremacists, racist tracts, misogynist screeds. And over time, we lose our capacity to distinguish between fact, opinion, and wholesale fiction. Tech platforms need to accept that they play a unique role in how we, as a people, and people around the world, are consuming information, and that their decisions have an impact on every aspect of society. With that power comes accountability. And in democracies like ours, at least, the need for some democratic oversight. As citizens, we have to take it upon ourselves to become better consumers of news, looking at sources, thinking before we share, and teaching our kids to become critical thinkers who know how to evaluate sources and separate opinion from fact. TV is a tool. The internet is a tool. Social media is a tool. At the end of the day, tools don't control us. We control them, and we can remake them. It's up to each of us to decide what we value, and then use the tools we've been given to advance those values. And I believe we should use every tool at our disposal to secure our greatest gift: a government of, by, for the people, for generations to come. And I hope you agree with me, and I look forward to you joining in the work. Thank you very much, everybody. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, so as much as we don't care for this individual, our prior president, oh goodness. Okay, Rock, come on. I gotta read your I'm trying to read Rock's comments and post them at the same time. It says, all political seats matter, federal and local, and we must occupy these seats or they will. Very true. And I'm sure you were referring to Mr. Obama and saying he is a tool. And he says, teaching our kids to identify BS like what this Kenya is talking about. Ooh, my goodness. But I thought this video was actually part of his video. You know, he did talk about how this is a tool. And I have to pull up the other part of the video, which I'll probably pull up tomorrow. But there's part of his speech where he talks about how, you know, just enough good information and bad enough information can muddy the waters, and it can distort people's vision of what's happening. And that's what we see happening, right? Because he said just enough truth with enough untruth for you to think what he was saying is true. If that makes any sense. It was like just enough bad, just enough good, just to make you feel like, okay, you're kind of right, but you're kind of wrong. Because first of all, we don't have a democracy, right? We have a republic. So there he was wrong. But then he goes, yeah, it's for the people, you know, by the people. Yes, it is. So he had enough truth and enough untruth, right? And at the end of it, it's like, do you support him or don't you support him, right? And it's crazy. It is insane. And Uncle's laughing and saying, you're right. Yeah. And this is how people get stuck, because they don't really listen till the end. It's like, okay, wait a minute. We don't have a democracy. We have a republic. Stop that. But then, you know, continues on with this sweetness and says, remember, this is for the people, by the people. Hey, guys, it's like, stop that. You look and sound like Satan. But this is what Satan does. This is why I opened up with that passage on 2 Timothy 3. In the last days, people will have a form of godliness and deny its power. This is someone that a lot of people put on their pedestal. A lot of people. Because they don't see the evil for what it really is. And it is evil. Because when people are telling you to vote against your best interest, your own interest, that's evil. that is, and it is what it is. But we have to take that personal responsibility. We no longer get to sit back and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe they said this to this. No, stop that. Stop sitting back acting like a victim. You're not a victim. Okay? If you are on social media looking for information, it is on you to look at the information. If somebody tells you the big, beautiful bill is good or bad, I don't care. Look at it for yourself. Look at the parts of the bill that affect you. If you're looking for Social Security, go to congress.gov, pull it up, and do a word search. Period. Read it for yourself. It is available to you. And if you can't do that, call somebody and have them help you. It is up to each and every one of us to do our job, to be informed consumers. That's why when I did my very first show, and I'm so glad that a lot of you guys hung in there with me because it was a long show, but I talked about the Smith-Month Act. And I also talked about the Smith-Month Modernization Act, right? That the Modernization Act allows for propaganda against the United States, and Obama actually is the one who did that, because the original act protected the United States from propaganda. So the same person that we just saw on screen talking about, yeah, it's a tool and, you really have to look deeper into. You're the same person who allowed propaganda on the United States. You, sir, when you had every ability to protect us, you decided not to. And then stand on stage and act like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that these things are happening. You interfered with legislation to allow it. Yeah, that part. That part. So with that, we're going to take a quick break. And yeah, I'll see you guys on the other side.
Also.
And thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. So we've been talking a little bit about just information, right? And we've been talking about the floods. I just had the last segment where we looked at a speech that Obama had done at Stanford University and how he is the same person who actually updated this Smith-Month Modernization Act that allows propaganda on United States citizens as opposed to protecting United States citizens, while sitting there saying, hey, social media is a tool. And I'm like, you're the same person that has allowed us to be taken advantage of. At the same time saying, hey, you got to be responsible. It's really crazy. It's really crazy. But this is what Satan does, right? Satan will, convince you that he doesn't exist. Just saying. Very successful at it. While using people. And that's the point that we have to remember. Satan uses people. He can use anybody that allows themselves to be used. And we have to remember that this is a spiritual war. Regardless of what you think or want to say, it is a spiritual war. It is a spiritual battle. And you need to be prepared and take personal responsibility for being prepared. And so with that, we're going to take a little bit of a look at all sides, right? My favorite news source to bring you guys, because we can see the news from all sides and see what people are really saying out there from the left, center, and the right. And so Trump announces a 50% tariff on Brazil. Okay. Cites treatment of Bolsonaro as a factor. There's a lot going on in Brazil. It's crazy. But it says President Trump has announced a 50% tariff on Brazil, partially due to the ongoing trial of his political ally, former Brazilian President Jair. I don't know if it's Jair. We'll go with Jair. Bolsonaro, set to begin on August 1st. The tariffs are the highest announced by the Trump administration this week. Now, just know, with all of these tariff announcements that he has, it does have an effect on the stock market. It does. It is what it is. If you got a portfolio, go and check it out. Just saying, you'll know when to buy and sell. So Trump addressed current Brazilian President Luiz Inacio Lula da Silva. Okay. In a letter published on his Truth Social platform, citing Brazil's legal case against Bolsonaro and labeling it an international disgrace and witch hunt. Trump also accused Brazil of insidious attacks on free elections and censorship of U.S. social media platforms. On April 2nd, which Trump termed Liberation Day, he said he planned to put only a 10% tariff on Brazil. So, okay, we're up 40% from 10%. So, Bolsonaro, often referred to as the Trump of the tropics, is currently facing charges for allegedly plotting to overturn his 2022 election loss, which Trump claims are unjust. Brazil was the 18th largest source of U.S. good imports last year, with over $42 billion worth of imports. Trump has continued to pursue a reciprocal tariff policy, which aims to correct trade deficits with other nations. Earlier this week, he set 25% tariffs on several countries, mostly Asia, which he did that. So NBC, this is how the media covered it. So NBC, that's left-leaning biased, they emphasized Trump's support of Bolsonaro as his allegations of Brazil. It also pointed out that the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Brazil, contradicting Trump's claims of a deficit. Now, the Wall Street Journal, which is center, shared the economic implications of the tariff and the potential impact on the U.S. stock market. So Investors Business Daily, which leans right, mentioned that Trump's announcement led to a dip in the stock market of a major Brazilian ETF and jet maker, Embraer. Okay, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Oh, thank you, Derek, for reposting the stream. So like I said before, I even read through that. It's like, yeah, check the stock market because, announcements of tariffs definitely, make an impact. And I'm interested, to see how NBC, talked about how, the U.S. actually has a trade surplus with Brazil. So, I haven't read that article, but my whole thing is, all right, if there's a trade surplus, are you showing the surplus? I don't know if they have a paywall. So we'll have to see this together, right? Because my whole thing is, whenever there's a rebuttal, show me the information. Don't just say it, right? Show me what you're talking about. All right. Blind survey. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is just giving the feedback of, how NBC News is. So I'll have to actually look up the article, because if you're saying that there is a trade surplus with Brazil, show me the trade surplus. So that's something that, I'll look into and bring to you guys. But when they're saying things like this, people should show you those sources and where they're coming from. Because a lot of times, and Cash Jordan talks about this in his videos, people will kind of surf the, how should I say it? They title surf, right? They'll see the title of different articles, but they won't actually read the whole article. And then they want to turn around and say, this is happening and that's happening. It's like, no, you got to read the article. You can't just say that. So I do like that all sides, they'll bring up, but they'll kind of at least summarize the article of what they're saying. But we should look more in depth and see, okay, do we have a trade surplus with Brazil? We should look into that. This is something I wanted to look into. I saw this and I was like, it says U.S. measles cases hit a record high. Now, we'll look at this article, but some things from the outset lets me know, like, okay, if it's at a high, do we have more people here, right, that may not have been vaccinated? And measles doesn't necessarily mean death. Now, there are a small percentage of people that do die from measles. I'm not saying they don't, but a large percentage of them actually survive. So when we're talking about cases, are we talking about people who have perished? Or are we talking about just cases? Because see, we did this. We played this game with COVID. And they were like, oh, we have all these cases. Okay, but how many of them were positive and how many of them were negative? Or how many of them were false positive? They never really said that. They just said, oh, all these cases. And they got all this outrage from that. So I hope we've become more informed, I should say, with that in mind. It says U.S. measles cases have hit their highest point since the virus was declared eliminated in 2000, with 1,277 confirmed cases across 38 states and Washington, D.C. in 2025. So who are these individuals? That's my whole thing. What's going on? It says most of the cases this year were from an outbreak in West Texas, and the majority of those affected were either unvaccinated or their vaccination status was unknown. Okay, got it. A 95% vaccination rate is reportedly needed to achieve herd immunity for measles. Around 93% of people in the U.S. are vaccinated against the virus. Up to 90% of unvaccinated people contract measles if exposed, according to the Center of Disease Control and Prevention. Okay, so who are the unvaccinated people? That's the question, right? That's what it comes back to, because most children get the measles, mumps, rubella vaccination around 18 months of age, right? So they're about a year and a half when they get it. And unfortunately, that particular vaccination has been attributed allegedly to autism. And I'm going to throw in all the buzzwords, right? It's alleged. So there have been some people to hold off on getting it at 18 months, and they're letting their children get it at about 3 or 4 when their immune systems can actually handle it. Still, there is still a small subset that allegedly get, unfortunately, autism from it because of the combination of the actual vaccine, because it's 3 vaccinations in one. It's not just one vaccination. So I need people to realize that. So for context, U.S. vaccination rates have reportedly been declining since 2020, and debate surrounding vaccines amplified with the appointment of Human and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is skeptical of some vaccines and their side effects. A group of medical organizations filed a lawsuit against Kennedy and the HHS last week over recent proposed rollbacks on COVID-19 recommendations. And I read that to us last week. I definitely went over this, but it's kind of interesting. I'm like, you can't throw all this on Kennedy. Stop that. People have stopped vaccinating their children for a few decades since the uptick in autism and the alleged comparison of autism and vaccines. So you can't just dump all of this on him. Like, stop that. It's kind of weird. I'm just saying, people are being weird. And this is how the media covered it. News outlets across the political spectrum emphasized the seriousness of the virus and role of the vaccination in controlling it. But outlets on the left tended to frame Kennedy more negatively. Now, the New York Times, that leans left bias, said Kennedy downplayed the outbreak, offered only muted support of vaccines, and endorsed unproven treatments for the virus. While Washington Examiner, that leans right, did not mention Kennedy's potential role in the case increase. Newsweek, which is center, focused more on statistics and the negative effects of polarization on policy improvements. You can't lay all this at the feet of Kennedy. Because see, what people do fail to realize is that back in 2021, with HHS, they actually put in place where individuals that crossed our borders illegally did not have to get vaccinated. They did that back in 2021. You can look it up. You can go to the HHS website and you can look that up. So they said essential workers and undocumented individuals. They wrote it in. I think they either wrote it in, I want to say they wrote it into the CARES Act. I have to double check that. But the HHS and the CARES Act actually wrote in policy that said that people that were here undocumented did not have to get immunized. So there was an uptick in measles. I want to say around in 2022, they were talking about this. So it's not just been in 2025 that there's been an uptick. It's because people don't have to get inoculated. Right? We still have religious freedoms not to get inoculated. And I can understand why now some parents are not inoculating their children, because a lot of these vaccines do have mRNA in them. And people are not really being given informed consent, and they're waiting to see what's actually in these vaccines. And they have every right to do that. Every right. Because see, with these cases, what they're not telling you is, did anybody perish or not from this measles outbreak? How many people have survived? How many people have died? They're not telling you that part, but they're fomenting all of this emotion like, oh my gosh, this is going to be such an outbreak. Stop that. This is less than 1% of the people. We have over 300 million people in the United States, and 1,277 cases. Stop that. And you're not telling us of how many of those people have actually perished. These are just cases, and which ones are positive and which ones are negative. They're not telling you that, but they are getting this outrage going. I don't want to call it faux outrage, but it kind of is. Kind of is. So with that, we're going to take a quick break, and I will see you guys on the other side. Thanks for joining us today.
At All Sides, we believe unbiased. At All Sides, we give bias ratings for hundreds of media outlets. By freeing people from filter bubbles and providing different perspectives, we can all be better equipped to understand the world and each other. So how do we do it?
And we are back. Thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Shakinoni Nichols, and I'll be your host this morning. And we have a comment from Dr. C saying, great show as always. Thank you so much. She said, yes, the secrets are intentional, serving wicked purposes. Yes, very, very true. Very true. Yes. Oh my gosh. And, I didn't even think about it like that, but yeah, they are serving wicked purposes. And so with that, just know that sometimes, I guess when what Dr. C means by wicked purposes, it's like what I was saying earlier with the information that with Obama, with the Smith-Mundt Act, with the Modernization Act, right? How we're allowed to be propagandized as the American purpose, as the American public. And that's the wicked purpose behind that. Just not really giving us the truth, but really muddying the waters. And so there were some other articles that I wanted to look at with you guys. One of them being, I don't know if anybody else has heard about this. It says the IRS clears way for churches to endorse politicians. I don't know how you guys feel about that. I know that I had responded to a post on X yesterday, and I was like, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, it kind of sets the pace and the tone for theocracy. And what I meant by saying that is when you bring, now that politics are being allowed to be in the church, I think it's one thing to say, hey, maybe we have a local person in our community running for politics, and we want to, get behind this person, or, maybe you should check this person out. I think that a shout out is okay. That even happened with Stacey Abrams. I think she went to Jamal Brand's church and they were like, hey, pray for her. She's running for office. I'm like, okay, I don't have an issue with that. I don't. What I have an issue with is when you try to steer people to vote for someone in particular, right? It's one thing to say, hey, this person is running for office. You should check them out, pray for them, whatever. It's another thing to be like, yeah, you got to vote for this person because of X, Y, and Z. It's like, ooh, I'm glad my pastor, he says, don't call me Republican. Don't call me Democrat, call me Christian, right? He really keeps it focused on, definitely wanting you to vote, pray about who you're voting for, and be informed about who's running, right? And those are all things that are good. It's like, I don't mind pastors saying things like that. But when they're allowed to just be like, hey, you should vote for this person for this reason, and it's like, yeah, it's a slippery slope. It just is. So the Internal Revenue Service said churches and houses of worship can now endorse political candidates without endangering their tax-exempt status. Well, they've been doing that. A lot of churches have been doing that. They've just been doing it in a way where they just, they loophole it. We'll say that. So the details, the announcement came in a court document on Monday regarding a case where the plaintiff sued over the 1954 Johnson Amendment, arguing it infringes on free speech rights. The amendment, named after Senator Lyndon B. Johnson, requires certain organizations, including churches, to refrain from participating or intervening in campaigns for public office as a condition of their nonprofit tax-exempt status. The court filing argued bona fide communications internal to a house of worship between the house of worship and its congregation in connection with religious services do neither of those things any more than does a family discussion concerning candidates. Thus, communications from a house of worship to its congregation in connection with religious services through its usual channels of communication on matters of faith do not run afoul of the Johnson Amendment as properly interpreted. Right? So, for context, the Johnson Amendment has rarely been enforced, with only one church losing tax-exempt status due to its political activism, according to NPR, which leans left bias. However, some churches say investigations cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars. President Trump has said he wants to eliminate the amendment. Not everyone sees the amendment as a free speech matter, though. So Diane Yentl, president and CEO of the National Council of Nonprofits, said the change could allow politicians to funnel campaign money tax-free. So how the media covered it: Fox Business, that leans right, and Just the News, that leans right, stuck to the facts of the ruling. NPR added, the context of endorsements from the pulpit aren't popular. Straight Arrow News, which is center, was the only outlet of the four to include opposition to the ruling. I'm just going to say it's still interesting because, as most of us have been going to church and most of us know, like my church in particular stays neutral, right? Even though I'm a political person in church, I stay very neutral. I mean, when I go to church, I'm not trying to get people to join the redemption party. Like people will ask me, because they see me on social media from my church. They're like, oh, how's the party doing? No, but I don't go out saying, hey, you need to do this. I don't do that. If someone wants to have a conversation with me, I will have that. But I am not actively trying to recruit people within my church body and home. Right. And I've seen certain churches and we can use Jamal Bryant, for example. He is very outwardly with stating his political position. I want to say earlier this year when there were individuals that went to the White House for Black History Month, he called them house Negroes and, it said a lot of disparaging things, and it was still in essence political, and you could tell that he did not want to support the current administration. I mean, it was very political, right? He didn't have to outright say who he supported and who he didn't support, but through his, I want to say, speech that he was preaching from the pulpit, you could tell who he supported and who he didn't. And this has gone on for years where people have, and I mean, even Republican preachers, right? You can tell that they're who they support and who they don't support. Now, what I find interesting is that, that the change could allow politicians to funnel campaign money tax-free. They've been doing that. There are a lot of politicians that actually have not-for-profit organizations, Stacey Abrams being one of them, right? And if you don't think some of that money didn't go to her campaign, think again. I'm sure it probably did. Not just her, other, politicians that are Republican and Democrat. Stop. They have figured it out, is all I'm saying. So, for this to go back, it's like, okay, I guess, and maybe the IRS is doing this because they don't want to get caught being biased. There was a time when I want to say that they came after, people said that they came after members of the Tea Party and different organizations that were Christian organizations that were probably Republican, and the IRS went after them. Maybe this is their way of trying to, as they say, make it good. But Unc says, my understanding is your redemption party actually supports others that may be running on other platforms. Yeah, we do. We support our redemptionists, and we do, encourage others on other platforms. Peyton Jackson. There's some people that like her, there's some people that don't, right? But what I do like about her is I do like some of her ideas and some of the policies she has that could help the Black community. Now, from what I've seen in her feed, she doesn't support reparations. That's fine. She's not a redemptionist, right? Now, if she were wanting to be a redemptionist candidate, she would have to support reparations because that's in our pledge. Yeah, but she is a Republican. And so she has the right to not support reparations. That's fine. But when it comes back to some of her other policies, I'm like, okay, some of her other policies could be beneficial to the Black community long term if she gets in office. And that's not to say that later on when she gets in office, she might see some policies that were like, you know what, this can help the Black community. And that might tie into reparations, right? But it's again looking at who has the back of the Black community and who doesn't, right? Because there's some people that have asked for the endorsement of the Redemption Party, backdoor. You guys you're not privy to every conversation that I've said, I'm not going to be able to support you, or the party can't back this type of candidate. And that's okay, right? That's totally fine, because sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. And with that, we're going to take a short break. And when we come back on the other side, we will have Judge Joe Brown join us here on Unfiltered Vision News. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
A life empowered is closer than you think. We're all looking for a better way. Reimagine what's next with a new sense of exuberance. Why not power on like you mean it? Or power off blissfully? A better sleep is a better awake. You've never moved like this before. With the energy nature intended. Imagine reprogramming the way you look at the speed of science. At longevity. At exhilaration. It's next level rejuvenation. Taking well-being from the inside out and outside in. The light within is ready to ignite. Be the light. LifeWave.
And thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News, bringing you the news unfiltered Monday through Friday, 7 to 9 a.m. Eastern. My name is Dr. Ashaki Noni Nichols, and I will be your host. And we now have Judge Joe Brown joining us here this morning. So let me bring him here on the stage. Hey, Judge, how are you?
Good morning, dear lady.
Good morning. Good morning. We can't see you, but we definitely can hear you, and that's fine. Just let me know how you want to do it this morning. If you want it to just be your voice, it's totally fine.
Well, I'm not trying to limit it to the voice. Let's see if we don't have the camera.
All righty.
Showing everything's supposed to be going. Let's see. What in the world?
Yeah, look, I know.
Technology is... Try to come back in again?
Okay, no, that's totally fine. I'll wait for you.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, so while the judge, does connect due to technical difficulties. So, Chris, I know that you sent a comment, but I do try to keep the show clean. So, if you wanted to resend your comment specifically of who you're speaking of, that would be great, because I'm not sure who you are referring to. But yeah, again, I try to keep the comments clean. So if you guys can refrain from profanity, because there are some people who might be listening with their kids, or, they just don't want to hear the profanity in the morning. And so that's why I try to make sure I keep away from it. Now, with some of the videos that I do play, some people do use profanity, and I am working on a app that can kind of filter out some of the profanity being used. So I definitely want to, like I said, I want to make sure that it's a clean show that people can listen to with their children. Oh, there we go. Now we got the judge. Let's try this again.
All right. You got me now.
I got you. Very good. Thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Mighty Men Thursday. I usually have like this wonderful music and introduction, but I wanted to, just jump right in and get you here on stage. So thank you for joining us. You come with no introduction because your name speaks for itself. And I've told everybody you're going to be on here, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Title VIII. I saw you on InfoWars the other day talking about it, and I wanted to get a little bit more into it so people can understand
what you're talking about with 8 U.S. Section Code 1324.
You're talking about Title 8, Section 1324 of the United States Codes, specifically criminal codes, to aid, abet, advise, counsel, procure, give comfort, assistance, attempt to shelter, attempt to aid in avoiding apprehension, detention, deportation of illegal aliens. It is a felony. And when you are attempting to set up a sanctuary city, you are providing transport, interfering with ICE officers, you're committing a felony. When you are in agreement with others to do so, it becomes a conspiracy, which ramps up the punishment. I have actually defended people, though it's been years ago, charged with such crimes. So I'm looking at governors, I'm looking at senators, congressmen, I'm looking at mayors, police chiefs, sheriffs, and such like, state officials who are patently guilty, according to their own omission statements and what they're attempting to do, of serious felonies on the federal level. And I don't understand why they haven't been prosecuted, but then I do, because there's been the tolerance over the last administration to bring people in. And what happens when you bring them in, the President of the United States has the authority to declare them to be fugitives from persecution, to grant them asylum. And if you're granted asylum, you don't have to apply for citizenship. You don't have to take instruction and pass test. You automatically become a citizen in 5 years from the effective date of that declaration, and it can be done retroactively. So let's say had Kamala Harris, Imhoff, become president, she could have issued an order declaring that this 30 to 60 million kind of strong contingent could have all been citizens through such status effective, say, January 2020. So 5 years from that would be right now, which means they'd be able to vote in the midterm elections next year. But that person did not win. So now we have all of these individuals who were part of this scam, and they're stuck with the fact that they're doubling down on committing federal felonies.
Now, did I want to say with Donald Trump introducing, or I say reintroducing, because it's already on the books, the 1798 Alien Enemies Act.
Yeah, but that's not Title 8, Section 1324.
Right. But I want to say, does it have an impact on that? Does that make sense?
You can go after them with the Title 8 situation independently of the early act that he's attempting to rely upon. And that early act is literally from the date reflected in the 1790, etc. That's 200 plus years ago. But this is a contemporaneous act that has been used on occasion.
Okay. So now with this, I guess, how would they enforce it? That's the part, right? Because it's there, to your point, but what does the enforcement look like?
Convene grand juries.
Okay.
And because it's federal, it doesn't even have to be local. You see that with what happened with Diddy. The search warrants were served in California and Florida, but we wind up with prosecution in New York. We get what they did with Trump all over the country, specifically and particularly in New York, again, trying to go after him. So anywhere there is an impact, you can bring somebody up on charges when they're federal.
Okay. So let's say
we go after California, Illinois, and New York, because those are the three major sanctuary cities that everybody always hears about, right?
Yeah,
with Illinois, Los Angeles, and New York City.
They've even tried to do it in Memphis. They have an opposition to the politics of Elon Musk, so he's trying to set up a super AI computer manufacturing center here. They don't want it in, but they're trying to bring in Blue Oval into a place called Mason, Tennessee, right outside of Memphis, and they've already hired 15,000 people, but they are from South Korea because Blue Oval is a South Korean company. So the mayor, the sheriff, chief of police, etc., have all tried to set up a sanctuary city, which is, of course, going to get them in trouble if people follow the law and grand juries have a meetup.
Okay.
And in California, you don't have to have the grand juries meet in Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Sacramento. There are all sorts of counties all over rural inland California that could do that. La-di-da-di-dee.
Wow. Wow. I mean, it's encouraging, but at the same time, I'm like, okay, who has the brass ones to actually get this done? That's my question. Because I'm like, okay, DOJ, do your job. If this is on the DOJ, right? I guess that's my question. Like, whose purview does this actually fall under to get it done?
U.S. attorney.
Okay.
And there are quite a few of them. Every judicial district, federal judicial district, has a U.S. attorney.
Okay. Okay. I want to say Alina Habba, she is the U.S. attorney over New Jersey, right? Or at least that area.
Or part of New Jersey.
Okay. Gotcha. So someone like her in these different areas could bring forth the charges.
They could present these accusations to a grand jury.
Okay. Okay. Wow.
And I'm sure they're conducting investigations as we speak to see the extent of it. Now they can hook up more seriously conspiracy charges.
Okay. Yeah. Because people really want relief, because now, you know, just with what's happening with ICE on the ground in places like Los Angeles and New Jersey and San Francisco, I mean, it's getting really violent. And even in Texas, I think there was like an ambush against ICE agents.
Yeah, it's lawlessness. That's like, let's say we decide we're going to go against all U.S. Marshals. Well, you know, aside from Wyatt Earp and all that bunch back in the 19th century having a problem if that happened, it might cause some difficulties, but that's essentially what's being done, because when you're going against ICE the way they are right now, you are flaunting Title 8, Section 1324. It's clear. It's a long set of statutes.
Okay. Okay. Well, like I said, I want to say this is good, and I'm glad we're having this conversation, and I'm glad you brought it up, you know, the way you did on Alex's show, but I wanted to bring you on my show. Thank you for coming, because I need people to hear that there is a way out of this. And in my opinion, if we have U.S. attorneys not acting upon this, why aren't they? Right? Who are they protecting?
They may be flat out ignorant.
Okay.
Knowledge and familiarity and experience in law is not today what it used to be. There are too many lawyers, and too many of them have too little experience in the actual use of the law. And we have governors who are completely ignorant of the law. We have mayors, and that list of officials I ran down initially, they ought to be deeply ashamed and pay for the fact that they're so ignorant of the law. Maxine Waters advocates the violation of the law all the time. So does Cory Booker. So does Jasmine Crockett. So do you have with Hakeem Jeffries. You get the whole 9 yards worth of the Democratic Party pantheon doing that. And I'm astonished at their ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fact that they're advocating it the way they are is in fact criminal. That's like people going off saying things about doing physical harm to the U.S. president. They seem to be doing that with impunity, but that is clearly and has long been against federal law. But they still do, even though they hold offices and ought to know better.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me because I'm like, okay, because they always cry free speech. And I'm like, no, there's a difference between free speech and incitement. You're inciting violence and you know what you're doing. And then you want to crawl under free speech and say, no, I'm just using my freedom. Like, stop that. You know you're wrong. Oops. He'll be back. I think your internet dropped out, Judge. I'll wait for you to come back. Ooh. Okay, let me remove him from the stage really quick. But I'm so glad that the judge, and we'll wait for him to come back on stage because technical difficulties are what they are. I've told y'all, we're all in this together. But Mark from the Soil, thank you so much for reposting the space. And hopefully the judge will, be back on to join us and I'll let him have last words. But I'm so grateful that he was willing to come on the show and talk about, the Title 8. Here we go. There we go. Got you back again. It's okay. Go ahead.
But some people just can't.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha. I know everybody always wants to call. Like that happens during my show, and I'm like, don't call me. But go ahead and continue with what you were saying.
Well, essentially, that's it. The law is being clearly broken. It's not brand new law. It's old law. It's not ancient like the one Trump cites, but it's on the books and it has been used with vigor from time to time. So there is this problem that is also inherent in the current circumstances. We do have this big dust up going on in the Middle East. Iran doesn't like us. There's a residual group from Iraq that doesn't like us. ISIS, Al Qaeda, you name it, they don't like us. China and the U.S. are likely to have hostilities in a couple of years over Taiwan. And we feel immune because there are two oceans between us and them, but they don't have B-2 bombers, but they don't need them. They don't need to go hijack aircraft and commit suicide and crash into Twin Towers or a Pentagon because they could walk across the southern border with backpacks full of military-grade explosives, trainings, detonation devices, get transportation courtesy of various and sundry state and federal government agencies, go where they want to, install the explosives, and await further instructions. And here we have all of these people right here, ready to go. They don't need to parachute in. They don't need to have a rubber boat launch from a submarine. They don't need helicopter incursions. They are already here in place. And you've got 1.5 million military trained male Chinese operative age in their 20s who've been allowed to walk freely across the border. You have people from the Middle East, everywhere we've got deep enemies. They've been coming in, and we've got quite a few tens of thousands of convicted murderers, rapists, drug dealers on a deep level, sex offenders, and nobody seems to have been interested with that. We've got Americans who have needs, who have emergency circumstances due to a bad economy at one point, and they're getting no help. But these people who have absolutely no connection to the United States are here. And by the way, that would lead into a discussion of what they're talking about with birthright citizenship. That was set up in the 14th Amendment to specifically undo the language of the Dred Scott decision, which was one of the worst episodes of the U.S. Supreme Court. And the language in the 14th Amendment is a specific refutation of Dred Scott. So Dred Scott was no longer the law. That was a case right before the Civil War that was still good law in America when the Civil War was over. So the 14th Amendment outlawed that. It is clear from an investigation and an examination of transcripts and recordations of congressional activity that there was absolutely no intent that the 14th Amendment and its impact on citizenship relative to where you were born was supposed to apply to somebody who was illegally here. In criminal law, it would be called the fruit of the poisonous tree. In other words, you planted a poisonous tree. In other words, you snuck across the border and you're not even supposed to be here. Then citizenship wouldn't automatically apply to your children because you weren't supposed to be here to have them. And technically, what's supposed to go on outside of humanitarian considerations, which should not apply here, is the same as what would happen, say, if I sentenced a woman to the penitentiary and there wasn't a relative to step in to take the children that she may have had. That doesn't excuse her from doing time for a murder case or an armed robbery case. Department of Human Services would take the children and put them in foster custody or some other sort of custody, and that's what ought to be going on. You come over here, you have the illegals. If you want to maintain the children as a future resource of the country, so if you reinstate the draft and you need cannon fodder, then there they are, but deport the parents. You just have to be cold-blooded about it. We are not here in the business of opening up our borders, unlike anybody else, anywhere else in the world, so we can invite in enemies in an overpopulation situation that does no good for the people who live here because someone wants to support the selfish, narrow-minded, short-sighted policy of some folk that said we have an opportunity to stuff the voting rolls very quickly, so let us go ahead and do this and screw the interest of the country.
Wow. Okay. Thank you for that take. But a lot of people don't really see it that way.
It looks obvious to me, and the people that are the pundits for mainstream media, and to a great extent, small and social media as well, they're ignorant. They don't know what's going on. You have 23-year-olds pontificating about the law. They've never been in court. They don't know the law. You have people who are supposed to be experts in civil rights law, and everybody flocks to them, and they've never tried a jury case. So they're amateurs. You have judges on state, local, federal benches, federal and state appellate courts, who may have tried 5 cases, 3 cases, or none at all as an attorney, but they're sitting on an appellate court and they're inexperienced. It's like you get a referral to a physician. You walk in and you see the degrees, and then you find out, whoa, wait a minute, this guy's never been an intern or a resident anywhere. Right. It's all book learning. He doesn't know what he's doing, and that's what you see.
Wow. Now, there was another topic that you had brought up on Alex's show regarding MAGA being a possible third party. Now, is that more so, I don't want to say a split within the Republican Party, right? But more so just a change in how they go about their politics within the Republican Party? Is that the shift?
It could be an actual change and you have an alternative, which is a healthy thing. Parties shuffle around. We started off with Whigs and Tories, the English parties. They quickly went belly up. At the very beginning of the 19th century, the Democratic Party was chartered to protect and expand slavery. By the late 1840s, the Democratic Party was the only organized political party in the United States. And in 1851, the Republican Party got chartered with one of its purposes being specifically the eradication and ending of slavery, abolition. And we have had parties come and go briefly, but the problem is funding an organization on a wide scale. But here you have Republicans who are supporting MAGA through their support of the personality of Donald Trump, who stands in their minds for manhood, versus those who want to have the boys in sports bras and panties compete against the girls and invade women's restrooms and stuff like that. You have the makings of a third party to offer some alternatives to the people. The Republican Party used to be the party of black people in America. And up until about 1960, if you found a black American, you found a Republican. So that had a lot to do with the Democratic candidate at the time, John F. Kennedy, calling up Sheriff Bubba Scott, let's say, a Democrat sheriff who was jacking up the civil rights demonstrators and specifically lusting to get a hold of Martin Luther King, and the Democratic candidate saying, hey, boys, this is your Democratic presidential candidate. I know I'm from Boston, but you guys want to get back in power. Let's get this dark guy a little bit better treatment. Nixon didn't know anything about it, and I did a report on that for social studies. I think I was in the 9th grade when it happened.
Okay. Wow.
So remember that. But up until that point, black folk were Republicans. So we get switches, and we have a thing where the Republican Party still has a tie-in with a bad episode where they were into Law and Order and sort of stepped on the Bill of Rights. Now they've discovered what it's like to have the Bill of Rights snatched out from under them, and it's not pretty. So they have become pro-Bill of Rights, but they still have that taint that MAGA does not. And the Democratic Party has stamped on the Bill of Rights hard, not for law and order, but to oppress and impose their rainbow cult on everybody. And that's their business to follow it, but we are not supposed to have an official cult, religion, or philosophy in the United States that can be imposed, but they're trying to put that rainbow thing in everywhere. That's their business. Get your freak on in your bedroom, but I mean, you can't cram it down everybody else's throat, which they're trying to literally do as a pun. But anyway, it is what it is.
Yeah, because I mean, I definitely saw that with Warnock when he got elected, because I live here in Georgia, and I actually asked him a question. There was a bill. It didn't go as far as to the floor, but it was something that was introduced. And I want to say it was Senate Bill 973. I have to double check that. But basically, it was saying within the bill that even if you saw something, you would have to believe it if it wasn't true. That means, like, if you saw a man and you knew that man was not a woman, you would still have to go along with the belief that that person had, right? Or you're wrong. Now, in Colorado, they recently just passed a bill in that state, making it basically a crime to misgender someone or to dead name them. Yeah, they've done this in Colorado, and I was like, what?
That's what I'm talking about. That's a total violation of everyone's First Amendment rights to instruct you and make it criminal for you not to accept a position. In other words, everybody's got free speech, free thoughts, but you're not supposed to have that. This is the official policy, so you have to go along with it. You can't put a cross, crescent, Hebrew star, symbol of Buddha, symbol of Confucianism, Zen, Taoism. You can't have six-armed Shiva anywhere in a government building, but you can put the rainbow all up and down the things, and you can impose that nihilistic self-hate where people don't like what they are and want to be something else, and they want to make everybody else not just accept it, but embrace it. In other words, express any difference or disagreement with it, which is fundamental to American First Amendment rights, then you become criminalized, and that kicks in this new thing that's called lawfare, which is using the criminal processes to impose a point of view or to penalize non-approved thought. That sounds like something out of Nazi Germany or fascist Italy.
Right, right, exactly. So, I mean, I was looking at it and I was like, in my opinion, I think if the constituents of Colorado, they should be able to push back and appeal this and take this to the Supreme Court to abolish something like this happening in other states, because it makes no sense. To your point, it totally violates the First Amendment. But again, to your other point, it introduces the fact that someone that has that cult mentality can pass policies to force people to be a part of the cult, even if they don't want to be. And that's dangerous.
And see, here's the other thing, too. You take your child from infancy, still in diapers, on up to Sunday school, or you take them to mosque, or you take them to temple, you take them to synagogue, and by the time they're 6, 7 years old, 8 years old, they're devout believers of whatever religion you try to inculcate them with. Well, the Rainbow Bunch through the schools gets to impose on preschool children, kindergarten through 12th grade, 5 days a week for the entire school year. For 5 hours a day, they get to take them to the effective equivalent of Sunday school, where there's rainbow all up and down the hall. And you're trying to get them into a situation where they become receptive to being taken to a veterinarian and being neutered or fixed.
Right. Right. And it's crazy because, again, to your point, it's like, okay, you're not going to allow Christianity in the schools, which, okay, I'm like, all right, I get it. But you put this in place and you say, okay, no, it's not a religion. We're just teaching people how to be, nice to one another, being kind to one another, being accepting. And it's like, no, this is a complete religion, because if you say something to one of these individuals that they don't like, they'll attack you.
Well,
they will attack you.
It's not just really a philosophical thing. It's a full-blown religion.
Yes.
Because there are a lot of gay people that don't go for what this rainbow cult is about. So It's not just exclusively homosexual in origin or basis, though that seems to be a catechism that is used to initiate people. It is a religion. And to give a parallel, think of Buddhism. Buddhism is an ancient and honorable religion, but where is the God? There's none required. You can have one or not. The same thing with the rainbow. It does not require a Godhead, but it is a system of philosophy, which is essentially nihilistic because it's built on hate, not self-love. In other words, now I'm not black and I'm proud. It would be I'm black and I want to be something else, play Michael Jackson and get your face lasered so all of your melanin cells are destroyed, and get your hair replaced with threaded in Polynesian hair, get massive surgery to get a new chin, cheekbones, and have so many nose surgeries that it gets necrotic and you have to have it amputated and wear prostheses and all of the so on and so forth. That's what it is. In other words, you hate yourself, so you want to be something else other than what you are. And it's based on sex, which I think is absolutely ridiculous the way they're dealing with it, because it's like, why don't we have a comparable thing where we have a new system of philosophy based on doggy style or reverse cowgirl on top? You see how absurd that sounds? We have to have a pride day in those who like to do reverse cowgirl on top. That would sound absolutely absurd, but a form of mutually assisted masturbation, because it's not really sex, because it has absolutely no connection with procreation.
Can't procreate, right?
It's a thing that all of a sudden has been elevated to the status of all of the classical religions, and unlike them, they can be practiced in schools, public schools. It can be imposed in government on local, state, and federal levels the way it was going. Something's wrong with that. Most 95% of Americans don't think that way, though a goodly percentage go along with it because they're trying to go along to get along, and they think the majority goes with that, and it doesn't. That's just propaganda from the mainstream media and from certain politicos and, shall we say, erotic adventurers who like to get into that and try to bamboozle the rest of the public that has had a 50-year-long diet of the glorification of dysfunction through its entertainment and communications media.
Very true. Very true. Well, thank you so much for joining us here this morning. I'll let you have last words.
In other words, we can be a great place. Black, white, brown, red, yellow. We all came out of Mother Africa. Some of us went to Europe and got real white. Some of us went to Asia, got yellow. Some came to America, got red. Some came back around, got brown. But we're all there. So we're going to have a unique situation where we need to cooperate, but we need to honor everybody else's particular origins or mixtures. And it's all about working hard and dealing with the fact that the world's not fair. The situation that we can overcome when we confront adversity, glory in the accomplishment of defeating adversity and coming out on top. It's an opportunity to be a hero or a shero, so we can do it and quit talking about what you can't do and start focusing on what you can do, which is damn near anything you put your mind to. And by the way, there's nobody oppressing your children sitting on the other side of the kitchen table. Sit yourself down in there and start doing homework with your kids so they get of the habit. So when they get a chance to walk across the stage, it's to get a full-fledged diploma, not a certificate of attendance, and they actually learn something and quit being lazy. Get out from in front of the TV set or from looking at your media screen, being entertained, and start enlightening yourself. We can do it.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for joining us here on Unfiltered Vision News this morning, Judge. I appreciate you.
Thank you, dear. I appreciate it. And have a great day.
Okay. You too. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining us here this morning on Unfiltered Vision News. And yeah, the judge said it best. We got to get off the couch, and not just get off the couch, but start really engaging with one another. Social media, to Barack Obama's point, is a tool, and it is a tool to be used, but it can also be abusive if not used properly. So it is up to us to actually, use self-control, use the brains that God has given us, and do better. And we can. As we like to say in my church, do good. So with that, we will see you guys tomorrow morning. And remember, stay well, stay focused, and stay unfiltered. We'll see you guys.